Hi, everybody, and welcome to Commical. It's been a while since I've put an episode out. For what reason? Well, running a business, raising a family, blah, blah, blah. Those kinds of really simple things sometimes get in the way. But I'm really excited to be back, and especially to be back with someone who's rather amazing. Welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you so much, Marie.
I'm really excited to have you here. You've got such an incredible career background.
Thank you.
Really, really diverse. And you've really lived life, haven't you? You've done a lot.
Yeah, I've said yes to a lot of things.
Before you were married, when your name was Sabrina Husami, you achieved quite a bit. In 2006, you were Miss World Australia, Miss World Asia Pacific, second runner-up of Miss World period, and Miss Grand Slam. And then in 2007, you just gave it all up. Was that because you were hungry?
What, tired of starving myself for the pageant?
You were dying for a Big Mac?
God, no. I'm Lebanese Indian, so food is my life. There was no starvation involved. I didn't actually give it up. I just worked extensively with charity, which was my whole point of entering the pageant to begin with. And once I had those titles, I was able to do that ad nauseum. So that's kind of where my focus shifted.
And then in 2009, you did The Apprentice.
Yes, that was a lot of fun.
Was that in the Donald Trump days? No, we didn't have Donald Trump. It was?
No, it was Mark Boris, who is of Yellow Brick Road fame, the mortgaging home loan company.
Yeah. He's amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, he's got a lot under his belt.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. And so tell me, after someone competes in a pageant like that and then does, The Apprentice, one would assume you want to become an influencer, but no.
I was never that kind of person, Marie. Before I entered the pageant, I was a university student. I was studying psychology and English literature. My goal was actually to become a child psychologist until I realized how shit psychology actually was and how much guesswork there is in that
and
field.
How annoying children are.
And that. But yes, I was on an academic or corporate career path, if you will, and always wanted to return to that, which is why I actually did The Apprentice. I was like, I wonder if I can get a bit of a taste of different corporate spaces and see if that helps me decide which avenue to take from there.
And did it?
It helped a lot. It helped me to go, I'd rather use my brain than my beauty or my entertainment industry background or accolades. And it helped me decide to get into sales. That's how I started my corporate career.
Right. And so tell me a little bit about that and what led you to recruitment, because your work in recruitment, your work in diversity and inclusion, your consulting work, which has a focus on people with a disability and making cities and museums more accessible to them. How on earth did you pivot in that direction?
Yeah, great question. I was a sales manager for a food technology company. So we were selling marketing tech to restaurants.
Yeah.
Again, obsessed with food. So that was right up my alley. That was not a hard job to apply for and then get into. But when I was recruiting for my own sales team, the candidates that were coming via a recruitment agency passed on compliments to the recruitment agent that said she's a really good interviewer. She's so easy to talk to. She asked really good questions. And so the recruitment agent actually reached out to me and said, hey, you're quite early in your career. Have you ever considered switching into recruitment itself, as you're such a good interviewer? And I was like, no, of course not. No one ever thinks to themselves, I'd like to be a recruiter. It's just not one of those ambitious career paths. But I decided to go in and just meet the team and see what it was all about. And they started to talk about the money that you could make, the contacts that you make, how much of a helpful factor is actually part of the role, like you're helping people find their dream jobs, essentially. And that really appealed to me. So I decided to give it a go. And here we are 11 years later. So that's the recruitment side.
And Has it lived up to did it live up to the dream that they sold you?
It did. It was a lot of fun. It was high energy. Back then recruitment was a little bit Wall Street, a little bit cowboy. So there was a lot of that real sales gun atmosphere, and you'd write your numbers up on a board and ring a bell when you made a placement. And so it was a really fun thing to be part of when you're young and you've got that hunger in you.
Yeah.
But I quickly switched away from agency recruitment, which means recruiting for any business that needs your help, to embedding myself internally within recruitment teams for a single company and becoming their talent leader, if you will, because there was so much more you could get involved with in terms of initiatives, whether it is diversity and inclusion or whether it's an internship program, graduate program, EVP. And I really loved having that more broad remit and understanding of how business operated.
And so why did you start Avanti Search?
I had spent about 8.5 years in internal recruitment by that point. My then fiance, I think, was a recruiter himself, but agency side, had always been agency side. And I was working in a role, I was in a global head of talent role for one of the largest wine companies in the world. And I had a team in the UK and a team in Australia. So I was working Aussie hours to look after my Australian team. And then I was working UK hours to look after the UK team, like 14, 15-hour days. Watching my fiance make money hand over fist and sit there on his 7-8 hour day, relaxed. And I was like, I'm really good at this. Why am I not doing what he's doing? You know, and could it be time, perhaps? Is there a bit of a taste in the market for an agency that has that internal recruitment approach that actually gives a shit about your brand, takes the time to get to know you, understands the facets of internal mechanisms, but you're an agency that can provide that to several different businesses. So that's why I started it. And luckily it was a boom period in recruitment. It was right after the pandemic sorted itself out and people started hiring again. So it was really successful right off the bat. I got very, very lucky with the timing of it.
Oh, I doubt it was luck, Sabrina. I haven't spoken to you already for 8 minutes and 23 seconds. I'm sure it was a lot of smarts and a hell of a lot of grit.
Thank you.
One of the things, I mean, I know that Avanti Search recruits for office work roles across any industry. Yeah. Right.
You've got it. So anything from sales to marketing to finance through to executives within a corporate business. You've got it.
But what I love about you that really made me want to chat to you was the lens through which you see people, because I like that you don't just look at a piece of paper. I liked that you really see the person behind the CV and look for potential. And I also love that you come at it from a diversity and inclusion perspective. Can you tell me a little bit about why you have that personal interest and what the benefits are to a company that does look for candidates that are diverse?
Yeah, absolutely. I have 2 types of disability myself. So, and I'm very diverse in background. You know, I'm half Lebanese, half Indian, but I was born in Australia. I was raised a Muslim, which was a minority religion with a very bad name back in the day, September 11, you know, at all. I'm a woman. So there was a lot already that I had experienced in terms of discrimination, people having some really negative conceptions of who I might be because of the parts that made me up. And I decided to start exploring what professional mechanisms I could get involved with that would help with the inclusivity side of things. So I actually started out on government committees that were about making sure that things were inclusive inside of a workforce, and then got invited to sit on the City of Sydney's Disability Inclusion Panel and the Australian Museums Panel, and eventually chaired the City of Sydney's panel. So it's, 7 or 8 years now, I think, of actually sitting there and learning about how an event, for example, is concocted in Sydney, and what are all of the different elements we have to think of to make sure everyone can access that event the same way. Or if we install, street furniture, what does that mean from a pathways perspective? And it's just such an interesting, you really start to understand how many different levels people can be affected on, and therefore how much you can help. Yeah, so it's a real passion project because I have 2 types of disability, but also because diversity has always been a thing for me.
Yeah, and I'm sure I speak for Lebanese people everywhere when I say, can we just claim you? Do you have to mention that? Can we just say you're 100% Lebanese and put you on our national flag? It's so cool.
I mean, I'm honoured.
Your mum might have a problem with it.
India will feel about that, yeah. Or Australia.
Worry about that later. It's not like they have a huge population that can have any kind of...
But to answer your other question about how does it improve businesses' bottom line?
Yeah.
It does exactly that. So the most profitable businesses in the Fortune 500 are those with an extremely diverse workforce and with more women in leadership roles. And there's a lot of movement now where if people start to pay attention to things like, let's pick the gender pay gap as an example, right? I think in Australia, it's something like in the top quarter of earners, like good money earners, they're double the amount of men than there are women. And in the bottom quarter of earners, there's double the amount of women than there are men. So when businesses hear stats like that, they start to think, okay, I can affect the bottom line by making sure that if I'm recruiting for a female candidate, perhaps I don't take her as the bargain that she is because she's been out of the workforce for longer, so she's been paid less systemically. Instead, I'm going to offer her the same amount as if she's been there for the entire time, like the guy was, offer the same amount of money and then start to move the needle. And I think there's a lot more appetite for that, affecting change from leaders now. And that's what I consulted them on. I'm like, do you realize that maybe a bargain's not a good thing? Maybe you're contributing to the problem, by offering her the lower salary. Should we maybe look at that differently?
And how do they do?
Yeah, they do. People are really interested now in how do we change this? I think a lot of people are starting to experience it themselves and they're like, screw this. Do you know what I mean?
Do you find that female leaders are more... Do you find that the female leaders are more receptive to that conversation than the male leaders?
No, it's an equal amount of receptivity. Yeah. I feel like maybe finally men realize that it's not enough to go, I'd offer the same opportunity to a woman that I would to a man. But how do you action change? You might think to yourself, I've got nothing against women. But then what do you do to change the situation for women? And so there's a lot more involvement, not just dialogue, which is great to see.
Yeah, Sabrina, tell me, since your surname changed from Husami to Matic, have you noticed a change in the way people first respond to you?
I haven't at all, but I think that's probably indicative of the times we live in now. About, 20 years ago now, I'm going to say, my very first boyfriend had a Lebanese name and surname and was applying to jobs in the pharmaceutical field. Straight out of uni, had a really good degree under his belt and wasn't getting any callbacks. And I remember him then anglicizing his name on his CV, exactly the same CV, same format, same wording, nothing changed except his name. And he started to get called by the same companies that had ignored him previously. So that was a real eye-opener. I remember just being so disheartened knowing that was a thing. And nowadays seeing that that's much, much less of an issue. But I think that's why so much recruitment technology offerings out there are now saying, why don't we de-identify CVs where you just remove the name altogether or the address, you don't know where that person lives, you can't make assumptions about, they're a Westie or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I have a similar story to your ex, actually, because I was applying for jobs and when I first graduated, well, I didn't really graduate because I dropped out of uni but didn't tell my parents, so I hope they're not listening. Because till this day, Marie studied. Yep, I did. I would apply for jobs and I'd have my address on there. Now, my maiden name was Naja, which I don't think is a typical Lebanese name and you can't directly pick it as one. It was El Naja, El Naja, El Najor, and then my parents dropped the El, so it was hard for people to tell. But I had my address there, which was Bankstown.
Right.
And I would send out my CVs and I'd get nothing. And then it dawned on me, Marie, just remove the Bankstown. So I removed my address and I got calls.
Isn't that
bizarre? I know.
Just based on where you live, assumptiveness,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what, as a business owner now, if people have their address, the more remote, the more diverse, the more Westie, the more
you give it a shot.
Yeah,
the more I give it a discrimination shot. Now?
It's oh shit! Did I just admit that? Okay, I do not do that, Sabrina, at all. But I do. I pay extra attention to people that I think might otherwise go overlooked.
Yeah.
But I still do. I'm still a business owner, right? So I'm still looking and thinking about, okay, I still have to get the best person for the job. So I also wonder from a diversity point of view, whether that plays into people's heads sometimes, just secretly, the woman comes across, they see she's in her 20s. Oh, is she going to have a baby? Oh God, is she going to leave me hanging? Is she going to leave me hanging? I think these are sometimes realities, and it's heartening to see that it's changing.
You are absolutely right. There's a wonderful little exercise that I sometimes do when I'm doing consulting work with leaders called the Circle of Six. Have you heard of it before?
No.
So you basically ask leaders to think of the 6 people in their life that they are closest to, as long as it's not a family member or their significant other. And they write those names at the top of a piece of paper. And then on the left-hand side, running downwards, they write different demographical info like age, gender, ethnicity, education, work background, etc.
Yeah.
And we ask these leaders to place a tick against each of those names if they happen to match you in that category, like they're the same age as you or the same ethnicity or the same gender or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of ticks that these leaders then usually see on their piece of paper, that the 6 people they trust the most in their world are actually really similar to them in a load of different ways. Mm-hmm. And the lesson that we then teach them is, because your innate trust is towards people who are a bit like for like, when you go through a hiring process and you're trying to, yes, you might be going through a formal assessment, but you're also trying to trust your by this preconceived bias as to who is actually trustworthy, and it's people that are like you, right? So we try and say, perhaps next time, don't trust that so-called gut instinct. Really have a look at the person that's challenging your gut a little bit, and you're going, oh, I don't know if they're a fit, but I can't put my finger on why. Maybe the why is because they're just a little bit different and you haven't walked in their shoes. They might be, let's say, that young lady that could be a mum in the not too distant future, but you're making assumptions because you're an older white guy, and that's just kind of the world that you inhabit. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's really useful exercise for breaking down those stereotypes during recruitment.
Now, diversity, yes, we've covered women, we've covered ethnicity, but what about people with a disability? Where does that fit in just a regular, so for example, I'm looking to hire somebody in a marketing role. If I wanted to be inclusive and cast that net, am I recruiting in exactly the same way, or am I changing my approach?
What a great question. I think there are little tweaks that we can all make to the recruitment process that will just remove some barriers to entry for disabled people, or for women, let's say. So a good example would be, if it comes to disabled people, if you put it in your ad what the physical or mental requirements are of the job, then people can self-select out. If they're like, oh, for example, you have to be able to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. I have a spinal condition that prohibits me from doing so I won't apply. Or no, despite my disability, I can actually do this thing. That's totally fine. I can apply for this. So that's one thing, is to write down the inherent requirements of the role. Another thing is obviously to make sure that it's compatible, the actual content or text is compatible with, let's say, screen reading software. So someone who has a vision impairment can actually use their technology to read the ad and be able to apply in a normal way. Yeah. Another very simple but obvious thing is to just write right at the bottom of your ad, we're committed to an inclusive recruitment process, so please contact us if you need an adjustment during your process so that we can adjust. For example, it might be someone like me with a hearing impairment. I need to be able to see my interviewer, not just have a phone interview, in order to do my best, because I read lips. So I might just say, do you mind if we hop on a video call instead of a phone call, so I have an equal chance at getting it right? Just little things like that. With women, this is a really interesting one for you, Marie. We're so critical of ourselves, apparently, that if the ideal candidate, bullet points like you need to have this level of experience, this education, this, that. Yeah. If that list is more than 6 bullet points long, women tend to self-select outside of the process. They go, I'm not going to apply. There's too much there that I can't do, or I am not. Whereas guys will go, oh, like 3 out of the 12 things are spot on for me. I'll hit apply for this. So the advice there is keep it short, no more than 6. That way there are less things for us to go, oh, I don't know if that's me, and therefore not even applying to begin with.
Is there an argument for, no, I'm in a list or 6 and I'm looking for that one woman out of a million who goes, yeah, absolutely, I can do this? There
is, but good luck. What if she doesn't see the ad? Like, good luck, man.
Got to cast that net. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go. You go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that the stats kind of speak for themselves. 18% of Aussies classify themselves as having some form of disability.
Wow.
1 in 5 of those disabled folk have some sort of mental or behavioral disorder.
Yeah.
So if you just think to yourself, okay, I'm cutting out 20% of my potential workforce if I'm not making my ad inclusive, or if I'm not making my process inclusive, what is that doing to my team and my work? That starts to shift people's perspective. I think it's not just about doing the right thing, being a good company, and we want everyone to join us. It's everyone can't join you. You've got 80% of the options now. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you know what? Doing the right, I think it's one thing to want to do the right thing, but you can't hire somebody who's got special needs if you can't deliver on those needs.
Absolutely.
Which is a whole other, which I want to get to. But
yes.
I want to ask you this. Seek, for example, is, I think, the number one job ad board in Australia.
It is, followed by LinkedIn.
Does that support the technology where people with a sight impairment or that are blind, is it able to translate and read it out to them? Is it compatible?
No idea. That's a great question. I have absolutely no idea if they've optimized their website that way.
So where do you recruit? If you're running an ad?
Great question. One of my biggest points of difference is I don't advertise. I only approach people. Yeah, I only tap specific people on the shoulder and say, I took a very thorough brief on what these guys are after. You are it. Would you be interested in having a chat with us? And then we go from there.
Wow. Sabrina, I never, ever thought such simple things could really leave out so many people. Hey,
I know.
It's freaking crazy.
Yeah, it is.
You must know a lot of people. How are you running a business by knowing all these candidates? My God, I don't think I know more than, no, I lie. I know a lot of people, but God, you'd have to know a ton, right?
Yeah. You've got to love people. You've got to be interested enough in them, I think, to understand their backstory, what makes them tick. That's what sets good recruiters apart from great recruiters, is how much can you get into the psyche of your individual, whether it's the hirer or the potential employee, and understand what's going to make them happy.
The bit about
a lot of psychology there.
I know. God, no wonder you're so good at what you do. Right? Wow. You spoke a little bit about having something in your ad that speaks about, you know, we are committed to being an inclusive workplace. If there are adjustments you require, let us know. I'm wearing my small business hat, okay?
Yeah.
How many, and small businesses make up, what is it, 80% of businesses in Australia are small businesses? How capable is a small business of genuinely making affordable adjustments, knowing they're not rolling in money? I'm not rolling in money. I'd love to be inclusive, but what kind of adjustments are typically required and how costly can they be? And is there any support for employers that want to make those adjustments? Oh God, that's a big question. Sorry.
Small business. No, it's a great question. And it's such an important one, because I think fear is the number one thing that stops businesses from actually even starting to approach the realm of making adjustments. They're like, it sounds like we'd have to do a lot, spend a lot. Where do we even begin? What if we do it poorly? You know, so they just stay away.
Yeah.
But I think that the key message is, as a small business owner or leader, you have more impact. You obviously have more say in a business. You've got more control over budget, and you have more control over the recruitment process than you would be in a huge conglomerate where you're just a cog, you know, in the system. So A, you have more impact to enact the change, but B, the learning process is simply in talking to people and finding out what adjustments they need as you go. I always say that don't be so paranoid that you have to implement all possible adjustments before you even start telling people we can adjust for you. The honest learning process is, we're starting to embark upon this inclusivity journey. Is there an adjustment you need? If the candidate says yes, there is. Okay, what is it? Talk to me about what that looks like. And then I'll go away, do my research and see if that's something that we can provide. And candidates love that. They don't even have this thing, and they're looking at potentially implementing it for me. That's a huge draw card. You know, it looks good if you've already got it, but it also is very touching if you don't, and you're going to go make the effort to potentially implement that measure. But to answer the other part of your question, what kinds of measures and how costly are they? Most of them cost nothing at all. The most common adjustment that's requested by candidates with any sort of need is flexibility. For example, I might need to go to physio for my leg twice a week. Do you mind if I leave work early and start, have a later day on the other 3 days to make up for it, for example?
Yeah.
Or I have ADHD. Do you mind if I let you know when I just need to tap out of work and take some time to reset and then log back in again so that I can be my best self whilst I'm working? So it costs nothing. There's a lot of trust that you have to establish between employer and employee, make sure that you're obviously given a way to monitor the work that they do. But the more psychological safety you create around them being able to ask for this space, this exchange of here's what I need to give you what you need, the better they become as employees, I typically find. As for actual extendy changes in the adjustment process, it's usually tech related. So for example, screen reading software for someone with a hearing impairment, or a couple of times I've asked different workplaces if I can have really noise cancelling earphones to help with my hearing impairment. And it's a couple $100 so you can pass it on to the next employee once that person leaves. It's not expensive,
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Do candidates have to reveal their disability? Like if it's something that might go on, do they have to go, if I've got ADHD, I don't have to tell you that, do I? I might want to keep that to myself.
Absolutely not. They're under no obligation to do so, which is why I think it's really important that during the recruitment process, when you're first meeting new humans, you ask the question, is there any sort of adjustment you need? So you're not saying do you have a disability? Tell me what it is. It's just what kind of adjustment do you need? And preface it with, we're committed to making a change if it's sensible and reasonable and doesn't affect your work. In fact, it helps you to do your work better. And that just lets them know you're not sitting there fishing and trying to sort of exclude them from the process by finding out if they have a disability. You're saying, I'm trying to help you do what you do even better. Is there something that you need? And people typically at that point will feel comfortable disclosing. I always say as well, vulnerability begets vulnerability. So if you have something yourself, I would often say in the recruitment process, I have a hearing impairment, really inclusive as a result of that. It's important, it's passionate to me to do something about it. Would you feel comfortable telling me if you need an adjustment? And people tend to open up a lot more if you're that open with them.
My brain, if I'm quiet, it's because I'm thinking of how small these little changes are, but how big the impact of them would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be making some changes myself, I think,
as
I'm playing this through my mind. Yeah, well, having you on the podcast has been like a free consulting session. Don't send me a bill.
I'm complimentarily here for you, however you need me.
That's absolutely fascinating, Sabrina. Thank you so much. I've learnt so much. I'm sure everybody listening has learnt so much.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. You've asked such insightful questions and you clearly have such an interest, very authentic questioning. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And you know what? I think, and I'm sure a lot of people like this, I have the best intentions, and I think with inclusivity, genuinely, I do. I'd love to be as inclusive as I possibly could. The fear, when you mentioned fear, I think that's perfect. That's the perfect word. I think about people from, the LGBTQI community, right? I would be fearful just in the interview process of perhaps using or saying something that might offend someone or, not approaching things in a way. So it's not, I would love to be, I just have so much to learn, I think.
Yes.
About how to have these very important conversations in a comfortable way.
I think if you're not afraid to just ask questions and do it with an open mind, that's often the most helpful and bond building way to do it. Mm-hmm. People just tend to trust you if you're curious enough to ask a lot of questions, and you're a podcaster, you're a great interviewer. So I think for people like you who are just naturals of being curious, that should be a really easy investigation process for you.
Fascinating. I've loved every minute. Everybody listening, if you're recruiting, you need to speak to Sabrina at Avanti Search.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Marie.
so much for your time. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
And you. Thank you so much.